Blessed love and peace, Rastafari. Respect and honor to His Majesty Haile Selassie I. Respect and honor to Her Majesty Waisawa Monin. All thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim Jah. We're back in it, and it's Thursday. It's dusky. We done just wrapped up a portion of the gathering joint for this evening, this week for Umoja Airi. And there is appropriateness for me sharing like a summation, like a wrap up of some of the joints I done shared this past week. As tedious, tenacious, and triumphant as it may be, give thanks and praise. Sex, marriage, health, and them things. I mentioned in the six traditions of the earth, six prominent traditions of the earth, rooted within Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Digha Nikaya, Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, and Tao Te Ching. There are basically three different approaches. In one approach, with respect to marriage, sex, and a relationship between man and woman, within the traditions of China and within India, generally speaking, and in very different ways, the basic approach is there's an absence of a doctrine of like commandments. Do this, don't do this, don't do this. This is the penalty, this and the other. It's basically just an understanding of the nature of things, cause and effect, recognizing what's healthy, what's unhealthy, what's harmful, what's beneficial, what's healing. Cause and effect, karma, Tao. That's the basic premise. So, and it's knowledge about that, recognizing that there's certain things that are harmful. Yeah, it's not a matter of like condemning people to hell or otherwise, or even accusing people of being sinners. Just like it's harmful. So if you don't want to feel that harm, don't do it. And there are things that are healing. So if you want to feel that healing, that well-being, do it. So that's basically a summation from the approach of the general approach of the paradigm shared by the traditions of China and India. When it comes to the Buddha and Jesus, it's very simple. Celibacy, no sex at all, not at all. Plain and simple on both accounts. Cats can argue that. There's a little arguing that with the Buddha, because the Buddha says it very explicitly. But within Christianity, cats may want to argue, and it's plain and simple. Jesus says, don't have sex. Now, he says it for those who have ears to hear. The same thing with Buddha. Buddha says, not everybody has to practice this thing, but that's the highest thing. And it's for people who share these teachings to support that. If they don't do it themselves, to support those that do. Same thing with Jesus, basically. So, the actuality, though, is that each of these traditions is perpetuated because the kinfolk are supported by householders who have sex with each other, have children, and who continue the teachings, the tradition, the narratives, the authority, the earthly authority through the generations. So there is an intrinsic relationship with the household life, even though it's a distance. And basically, the wisdom, particularly from the Buddha, is that the household life is just very challenging. There's just, you have to have a lot of you got a lot of things to do in terms of providing food on the table, dealing with like navigating and negotiating with the competitions of the earthly realm, and additionally vying for a chunk of the pie and everything. So it's very difficult to be like fully optimally righteous and ethical, empathetic, and additionally because cats can just see the finiteness of within the competition. So the methodology of celibacy is just letting it go, not being a competition, and not being a competitor, in that people are increasingly willing to listen and heed and even support the cause of the celibate spiritual aspirant, the bhikshu, the sadhu, can we say the benevolent Samaritan, kind of sort of lightweight. So that's the methodology, the paradigm within Christianity and Buddhism. Then we get to Islam and Israel, Judaism, and in each of these traditions, in each of the traditions, marriage is supported, marriage is encouraged, And in the paradigm of marriage, a man can have multiple wives, and it's favorable to have just one wife, but a man can have multiple wives. And even beyond that, so it's supported, and it's a way of recognizing that this is how the community is continuing. And now the difference between Islam and Israel is that in Israel it's a commandment. A man and woman have to have, a man in this life has to have children. That's the guidance. Just like being honest, observing Shabbat, and additionally, it's a mitzvah to be married, to have children, and to raise the children in these teachings as well, to walk on this earth in a righteous way. In Islam, it's less of a commandment. It is encouraged. It's recognized that people can live a celibate life, but it's not a necessary thing. Marriage is encouraged because it's recognized that marriage is part of the partnership, the intrinsic partnership between the primordial partnership between man and woman, and it helps both individuals, both the man and the woman, in this life, in that partnership support, and additionally, and so it's very much encouraged, and to do it in a proper way. So in Israel, in Israel and in Islam, marriage is prominent, significant, supported. There are a lot of rules concerning how to go about being married, who can marry who, and what the proper behavior is within marriage, how to support the marriages of others, and what appropriate interaction is between married couples as community. There is description of the responsibilities a husband has towards a wife in terms of material support, even conjugal responsibilities. Similarly, with a wife, of being in many ways obedient, but in that sense, it's a matter of increasingly being obedient of the ethics of the family that guide the entirety, and the man being a having increasing responsibility in adhering to that. And so that's traditionally how we can understand the notion of a woman obeying the husband, but in actuality it's the woman obeying the same principles that the husband does. The husband just has a greater responsibility in knowing what those principles are and adhering to those principles, and the woman has an increasing responsibility of sharing the principles, of raising the children within those principles in a nurturing, secluded environment, away from all that competition and everything else like that. So again, Israel, the Torah and the Quran, respectively, and very similarly, provide guidance in that respect. Now, at the same time, there's also the allowance of divorce within the Quran and within the Torah, and so there's that element. And again, a husband can have numerous wives, and even beyond that, again, according to Torah and according to the Quran, a man can also have concubines, female slaves, and have sex with the female slaves. That's the actuality. As cringe as it may seem, that's the actuality, and it's a very significant and important thing to recognize, because it's a release valve that provides a significant amount of how to describe this. It provides some leeway in terms of the ebbs and flows of society, diplomacy, hierarchies, and additionally, whereby a man can a man who has those proclivities, a man who has the mental fortitude, and additionally in the intrinsic competitiveness, essentially, to guide that in an increasingly constructive way, with the anticipation of being rewarded with the relationship with other women, and as again, as objectifying and whatever that may seem to be, and that it is, that's what it is, and it's allowed within the Quran, and it is allowed within the Torah, even though it's very much against today's standards. But again, today's standards are very hypocritical anyway. So without getting too much into that, that's the summation of these joints. Now, I'll share with you some further insight on my personal experience for those whom it benefits, who experience similar circumstances, similar challenges, conundrums, and bewilderment, and trying to figure out some solutions, just even figure out like what the challenge is. So one of the things that I mentioned before, that being mixed, there tends to be the the pigeonholing of mixed people into a liberal methodology of a lifestyle of just laissez-faire, whatever, whatever. And there's a lot of selfishness within that. There's a lot of mutual predatoriness, a lot of unhealthy interaction and unhealthy objectification, even when it's mutual and consensual, and it's unsustainable. It wanes eventually at some stage in life, around middle age, even before that part, and it leads towards malaise. It leads to depression. It leads to a certain nihilism. It leads to, I mean, the indulgence, self-indulgence, self-involvement, and additionally leads to that kind of like desolationist kind of experience and despondency, depression, and things like that. And some cats might last a little bit longer than other cats, and some cats can be further predatory and very, very skillful otherwise. But anyways, that's one of the challenges in the mixed community is that there's the aggregate of the mainstream tends to, like, just particularly in Western civilization, tends to just, and particularly Eurocentric civilization, tends to just pigeonhole mixes just being an other, and then just throws others within like the rebellious element of its society, of its domestic society. And the rebellious element is kind of just, again, free for all. Don't judge me. I'm okay. Da 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 da. And there's a lot of resonance within that, because for those who experience abuse in addition, it's like, okay, it's like a relief, but at the same time, like, that, what's the purpose of life if it's just about oneself? It's meaningless. So that's one of the challenges with being mixed, because anyways, without getting too much into that, so. And that affects, again, understandings of marriage, understandings of sex, understandings of healthy relationship. And my point for that is that what I recognize is that within my spiritual path, I live a lifestyle that is increasingly conservative, that has a conservative perspective methodology when it comes to traditional family and relationships, and additionally. So, but at the same time, so at the same time, loving everybody and interacting with everybody. And the challenge with that is because those who have traditional viewpoints concerning family and relationships, and additionally, tend to be very homogenous and only mess with each other, because it's essentially a double standard, where people are very cool with each other, with like folk, but with people who are different, don't mess with them. People who do things in a different way, no, don't mess with them. It's getting dark now, because I said it was dusky. So traditional people, conservative people, but traditional people only mess with each other and don't mess with anybody outside. And there's purpose to that, because again, once the lines start getting blurry and everything, it's difficult to keep that maintain that discipline, particularly in teaching that to teaching that to children, and additionally. So that it's an emerging kind of paradigm of being liberal in terms of having bridges with the different communities, and genuinely, like, loving and working with all types, but at the same time having a conservative view that abstains from delving into the whole free-for-all when it comes to sex and other types of indulgences, even like intoxicants, eating all different types of food or whatever, just like a free-fall kind of lifestyle, even a bohemian lifestyle perhaps. It's different from that, what I'm talking about. And we can find this combination, this balance of conservative and liberal within certain mystic traditions that have a conscientiousness of otherness, and a peacefulness with otherness, a cooperation with otherness, but at the same time recognizing and having a knowledge about the traditional teachings that are very conservative. So within Sufism, within mystic Judaism, within mystic Christianity, within even Eastern traditions, it's not even a mystical kind of like branch. It's kind of like intuitively part of that. We can see this within Jain. We can see this within Sikhi to a large extent as well. That's one other thing. Baha'i, yes, and Rastafari. So, anyways, that's one thing I recognize. Now, the other thing I recognize is that, here we go. I am corrupted in this life at a very early age, and without being knowledgeable about that actuality, what the implications are, even much about it, any of that, and just progressing through life with that frame, with that frame of reference. And it's only later in life that I become increasingly aware of, like, wait a minute, these things ain't proper. But by that point, I already corrupt numerous kinfolk in this life, and so as much of amends that I endeavor to make with that, performing teshuva, atonement, making apologies, and doing the traditional measures to atone for that, I still have that karma, and that affects all my relationships from this moment continuing on in life, regarding marriage and additionally. And so that's just life. Now, there are a lot of kinfolk who experience that too, and it's very difficult to kind of come to terms with, to even acknowledge that, because it affects even just every relationship that one has in life: parents, siblings, family, friends, and additionally, because a lot of guys don't want to think about that because they're enveloped in it too, and they don't want to recognize like the improperness of it. And it affects job implications and everything about life it affects. So when one arrives at that understanding, there are basically two paths a person has the option of taking. When a person recognizes that the person is corrupted, regardless of when it happens or whatever, and that sounds like somewhat passive, but everybody experiences some element of corruption in life, the coming of age kind of experience. And there are basically two options a person can take. One is either become merciless, like not giving two fucks, not giving two shits, and just going for broke, and dolo style, and with whatever facade is that is facilitated, whether it's like just outright cutthroat or whether it's sly and slick and everything else like that. But that's one option, just to be merciless, just turn off and like just say bump life, and I'm go for whatever. That's one methodology. The other methodology is to throw oneself at the mercy of a community. I mean, some cats go the isolationist methodology, but that element kind of goes into either one of those that I just mentioned. So it's basically just the merciless or the mercy, throwing oneself at the mercy of a community. Be like, look, I'm messed up. Da 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 da. I'm trying to do my best. Can y'all accept me and like support me in this community? And I'll take the humble spot, getting where I fit in, and there it is. So and for some kinfolk that's easier said than done. When I endeavored to do that through the years, with a number of different communities, what I recognize is that and particularly religious communities, every community is basically intrinsically, thoroughly, categorically racist, anti-African, particularly. Across the globe, except obviously in many ways in Africa, and within Afrocentric kinfolk. There's just a colorism, and there's a racism, and there's little getting around that. That's just the actuality, and it's been that way for thousands of years. Particularly when you look at the scriptures from these ancient traditions, it's right there too. So the prospect of like, even in taking the humble thing and like pursuing and cultivating like a genuine livelihood or genuine lifestyle, it's just recognizing that there's always going to be an undue, an unjust, an illegal, according to the precepts of the tradition itself, an illegal devaluation and we can call it dehumanization as well. That's what it is. As long as one is accepted within the fold of the community, and the community will support the person as a lesser entity, and as long as the person is willing to accept that lesser entity status, and the person may be even like have a wife, it may even have, or a husband if the person's a woman in that situation. But the person even may marry, and it might be somebody who's marginalized, and additionally, and so someone who's commensurate with the perceived value of the newbie or whatever. It might even be somebody who's of considerable ranking in like with prospect of the children through generation and generation being able to establish themselves within like the hierarchy within the society, and kind of like forgetting the unfortunate past and heritage that the person comes from. And that's nasty. That's what people do for thousands of years, for even the recent hundreds of years, and continually. So, anyways, but that's the actuality. When one is of African ancestry, it's just categorical devaluation. And it's unjust, it's illegal according to the own traditional rules and laws. And that's what's particularly difficult, because that means that everybody who even supports the person is a hypocrite, and it undermines the legitimacy of the tradition itself. And that's part of the paradox that these kinfolk, these holy traditions, are need to reconcile, because that's the actuality. Um, so that was the challenge, because looking for that place in any of the traditions is just rote devaluation. And it wasn't even just a matter, again, of just like sucking it up, and just being okay, I'll do my best in this generation, and do my best for my children, and then prepare for future generations. But just recognizing that, no, because this goes against the teachings. How can I genuinely believe and practice these teachings and accept this illegal status of devaluation? It just undermines the whole faith itself. So it's just like, I can't do it. And then when in going to Rastafari, yes, but also additional Afrocentric religiosity and traditions, there's racism and colorism against people who are of European ancestry and lighter complexion. So again, this is the same thing, but just it's not. In some ways, it's a reactionary. In some ways, it's just intrinsically. When we look at the ancient teachings, and additionally, there's the shibboleth and the narratives that just explain the lesser status of those who are other than the darkest of this earth. So in terms of color, the skin, pigmentation, melanin, as it's called in the science jargon. So again, there's an absence of a sanctuary, or even it's not. It may have less of a hypocrisy in terms of contradicting the traditional laws, but still, it's other than a sanctuary, a safe place to raise children, and to genuinely, with benevolent will, consider, okay, my wife and I we're going to have children and raise our children in this life, because that's subjecting life to rote devaluation, and are precluded from doing that. Then the other option is the republics, like the secular option outside of religion, and there's still the colorism, there's still the racism in science, in the republic, and additionally. So the solution I find is working and living and believing and practicing within Rastafari, but as a mixed color Rastafari, and upfront, candid, and Rastafari brethren and sisterin and I are working on that negotiation, because I have legit status, and our circle has legit status in the African diaspora, in the work that we do for years and years and years, decades at this point, in supporting and building within the African diaspora on the continent, and here and further around the earth. So that's legit, and it's not for the sake of just getting an in and a credential. That's who we are. We honor our ancestors, and that's part of, though that's what we do. That's our responsibility, and so we fulfill that strongly by the grace of God, and give thanks and praise. And so our African brethren and sisters have to recognize that, and honor that, and respect that, and support that. And that might sound egotistical, that might sound immodest. That's just facts. Just like we do a significant amount to support our Eurocentric kinfolk, our European kinfolk, and to be honest, Asian kinfolk, Middle East kinfolk, and further. And so each of these kinfolk have to recognize that, and recognize that even in our kumbaya, in the peace work that we do, that might seem like marginal, and kind of just like not the core of what each tradition is. It provides tremendous benefits of peace, reconciliation, understanding, and cooperation with other communities outside of each one's own fold. And we've been doing it legit for a long time. Years and decades, even generations before us. So we're part of a legacy. Hallelujah, Baruch Hashem, Alhamdulillah, Jai Om, Shishir, Bado. So anyways, now I was talking about relationship, marriage, corruption, finding a solution. So now, when it comes to the experience of um, the republic is based upon the experience of the individual. It intrinsically undermines the traditional family, regardless of what the ethnicity or race or religion is. The republic just emphasizes the individual, and because of that, it erodes the fabric of relationship with others in the family. Marriage itself, marriage becomes just a pretense, effectively, and sex is conducted to different degrees of faithfulness, but it becomes increasingly rife with corruption because it's less founded within precepts of um, uh, altruism. So, recognizing that, as I progress in my spiritual path, I mentioned before that I have 11 wives in this life. 9 wives I have before I graduate from law school over 20 years ago, without knowing properly what marriage is, and additionally, 2 wives I married within recent years, along knowing, learning, and practicing in an increasingly righteous and healthy way. That being said, still significant challenges, because there's much to reconcile, and so my wives have yet to live with me. The marriages with my wives have yet to be sanctioned by a community that formally, officially recognizes that. And in the meanwhile, um, there is the experience of persecution. Um, where I am sitting at this very moment is claimed by the world system. That's getting into ghost story mode. It's claimed by the world system, specifically the subsidiary of the United States, and be, amidst that, there is a prohibition of cohabitation within these premises, meaning that um, the rules that are communicated from the world system, and specifically the United States, is such that that threatens violent action, eviction, and that might sound benign, but what eviction essentially equates to is guys with guns coming to the door and threatening expulsion, abduction, and indefinite incarceration accordingly. So that's the threat, amidst even just having somebody else besides myself living here for a period longer than a few days. It's an illegal rule. It's against the United Nations Charter. It's against the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's against the U.S. Constitution, and additionally, but since when does that matter? U.S. law matters? No, we gotta think of something like that. But anyways, there's something there. Um, and I don't mean to sound snarky. We're getting into the dark energy at this moment, and again, dark energy is not evil energy. It's a different nature. So, um, I'm doing this like I did. All right, here we go. There we go. Shining the lights in my eye again. Well, speaking about, anyways. All right. So that's the standing threat, and that's communicated even before I locate here, a number of years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. and on previous occasions when I do help kinfolk out from the streets and additionally need a place to stay for a brief period of time, um, there are threats directly made again, that if that's the case, then eviction, da 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 da. And eventually I was locked up for a period of time because I was helping kinfolk out. So those are conditions. So when it comes to having a wife here, um, it's one thing to help kinfolk out on the street and just let kinfolk know, look, this situation here, it can get hectic if y'all trying to stay here. I'm just letting you know what the circumstances are. Kinfolk, particularly men, it was men. So let them know, and that was that. But it's one thing when availing other brethren to that type of hostility and violence. Less that prospect is less a go when it comes to women. We have to be much further secure, and assured when it comes to protecting the women within our community. So because of that, it's a matter of like securing agreements beforehand. But like, yo, you're not gonna come here through here right here if I have my wife here, yeah. And so what we receive is verbal, indirect assurances of like, we're straight now, or we'll talk about it when happen. But no, for me to be here, there were the things that need to be signed in paper and this, that, and the other. And so that's when the system is serious about something, when it's reduced to a contract. So we have yet to have that written, a formal assurance of acceptance of my wife's living here with me. And so because of that, it has yet to happen. That's one of the reasons, a significant reason for that. And thus, amidst those conditions, I leave here. I go to another country, soliciting political asylum, and it is illegally denied, and I am forcefully brought back here. And thus, the question emerges of how is an individual, a man, in such circumstances, how does a man establish a house and wherein to cohabit with his wife and to raise a family, particularly as stipulated within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, within the Declaration of Independence, presumably in some way remotely within the U.S. Constitution, and further. If it's illegal for a wife to cohabit with a man in his own domicile, and in that circumstance he leaves the nation to reside in another nation where he can cohabit with his wife, but when he moves to the other nation, he's forcibly brought back to the same nation where it is illegal for him to cohabit with his wife. I lived on the street. I went to the street, and I got picked up on the street and locked up for being on the street, and then brought back here again. So there seems to be, well, there's a lot of outs, but in terms of a proper, peaceful, and sustainable out, that's to the optimal well-being of all kinfolk. There seems to be ridiculously little solution concerning that. Like I said, I've lived here and it's been illegal. I've left here and been dragged back. I've gone to the streets and been dragged back here as well. So meanwhile, life continues. Gray hairs grow, and additionally, and the thing about the republic is it's not one person versus another person. There's not one person in charge. It's revolving positions of authority. So it's a system, and the system can just people punch a clock and continue the illegal actions, and then punch out, and then somebody else comes in. So the names change, and people forget. People don't remember what happened before. I don't remember anything that happened about that. I wasn't here. That wasn't me. So there's lack of responsibility, there's a lack of accountability, there's lack of recollection, there's lack of loyalty, there's lack of interest, there's lack of commitment, there's lack of ethics and integrity. It's just a matter of just being part of a cog and getting compensation for that, and basically just doing best to do nothing, and just keep things status quo. But anyways, amidst that, nature and needs, and um, a man has needs, and a woman has needs, and when a man is commanded to be married to have children, there is, even beyond the needs, there is a divine um, ordinance, a divine commandment to do that. So, all that being said, um, that's where things are at this moment, and an interesting observation or consideration that is shared with me recently, even just today, is that um, my sexuality is beyond my control. The sexuality of every individual is beyond each individual's control. And the logic of that is this. When we talk about sexuality, we're talking about sexual behavior. And when we're talking about sexual behavior, we're talking about sexual intercourse. And sexual intercourse involves mutual consensual interaction between two people. That means that it's beyond just one individual. That means the individual relies upon somebody else to fulfill, to manifest, to consummate that endeavor, that yearning, that guidance, that mitzvah, or however we want to do it. So the sexuality that encompasses that kind of aggregate of experience is beyond one's own control, because a person doesn't control what somebody else does. Basically, effectively, people can be very manipulative and everything else like that, but essentially a person does not control what somebody else does. Absolutely. So the sexuality of an individual in interacting with a person, regardless of what the nature of that sexual exchange is, sexual interaction is, whether it's through marriage, whether it's through adultery, promiscuity, rape, or whatever else, the person is still relying upon somebody else. Um, so it's something interesting for consideration, because that's intrinsically like the intrinsic humility that is involved in that endeavor of consummation of relationship, even in a primordial and existential sense. And so it's not a matter about being homosexual or heterosexual or anything else like that. It's just a matter of recognizing, because even whether one is heterosexual or homosexual or whatever, it still relies upon the will and the existence of somebody else. If it's bestiality, same thing. Even if it's just asexuality, that's still relying upon something else. Because even ultimately, even if somebody's celibate, or if somebody just masturbates to the thought of one's own self and narcissistically, somebody actually eventually at some point has to recognize that being comes from somebody else. And when engaging in that act of procreation, because that's what it is, has to be in some way, some degree of direct consciousness, be aware of like the continuity of like where does this come from, what's the purpose of that, and recognize that even in that very absolute isolated asexual experience, the person comes from somebody else, some other people, other persons, and there's the requirement of reconciliation with that. So it's a very challenging thing for people who are conditioned to be not just stubborn, not just I don't say hard-headed, but very fiercely individualistic, and just concentrating on one's own kind of thing, even in kind of like a sheep mode of just like fulfilling one's tasks for one's job and just doing that, and tending to oneself, and staying out of the trouble, staying out even out of ambitions and all those kind of career track kind of joints or whatever. It's even particularly within those experiences, it's very difficult to reconcile the necessity of the actuality of needing somebody else to fulfill one's own experience. So those are some thoughts that I'm sharing. Now, to be honest, at this point, where I am in dealing with what I'm dealing with. I am on the brink of. So first of all, I'm committed to. I'm commanded to be married to have children. So the tract of celibacy is other than an option, um, and so it's a matter of dedicating and consecrating myself to my relationship with my wives in marriage, um, and amidst the challenges and everything else, continually um, navigating and negotiating the prospect of marrying another woman in the immediate sense at this moment, who is increasingly proximate with the discipline and the conscientiousness and devotion to the same cause that I am devoted within. Um, so that's a continual challenge because our behavior, who we commit ourselves to, particularly in a um, marital and conjugal context, speaks so much about who we are, the character of who we are, ultimately in this earthly walk, beyond just our nice game or whatever else. I mean, that's that's the crux of it, and it's easy. It's easier said than done because it's beyond our control. And like I said, it involves um, shared discipline, and I live a very strict life. It's not fun. It's boring. It's actually it's not fun. It can seem fun when people look at it at certain times, but in those occasions, like it's work. Like it's like a musician on stage. There, it could seem like fun, but yo, that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of responsibility. So, um, anyways, but it's beautiful and it's joy, but it's a whole lot of work. It's a whole lot of pain. It's a whole lot of challenges, and it's difficult. And it's difficult for me after doing it for serious, dedicated for 20 years. Um, it's difficult for a woman who is raised in a different way, who's accustomed to certain comforts and certain ways of valuing herself, certain knowledge about like ways of being within certain elements of society, particularly when going through academia and having a certain knowledge, temporal knowledge about civilization. And additionally, there are a lot of social precepts and etiquette and things like that that go hand in hand with that type of ascension within the academic hierarchy. And it's very difficult to let that go. It's not even just a matter of letting it go, but there are relationships that are attached with that etiquette in those ways, and additionally, and it's challenging, and again, family and friends, and additionally, so even when a woman is very drawn towards and interested and motivated and like sees the destiny, perhaps is one way to describe it. It's um, a little bit fantastical, but just sees the beauty, the truth, um, uh, within this path. It's very difficult to take steps in that direction, and I ain't perfect. I'm not. Anyway, all right. So amidst these conditions, to be honest, I'm at the brink of securing virtual concubines in the ways permitted, made permissible within the Quran and within Torah, um, and that it sounds terrible. And additionally, but the thing is, that's like the norm of conventional society at this point, and it's not. I'm not going into details of what that actually means or whatever else because it's not favorable. But it's challenging not to do that because, like as I mentioned in the previous joint, even just going out the door and going to the store, getting food, and additionally, there's just a lot of things that make it very difficult for a man to be single and celibate within these conditions, and particularly when uh, when that is compounded by prohibitions and threats towards the man for having a wife, and additionally, and so in terms of planning and preparation and the prospects of properly and prosperly um, cohabiting with a wife, um, it the prospect of the concubines, as heinous as that sounds and is increasingly the probable. Uh, so I will say that part of the purpose for me saying that, amidst all the cringe I share for the past week, particularly, and I've shared these things for years at this point. Um, Part of the purpose for me sharing that is because I know that the world system is listening to this, and I know that the world system processes this, and I know that the world system responds to this. I see the evidence of that. It becomes increasingly evident, and it's not a matter of being like superior, inferior, or this and the other, but this is the methodology of negotiation, and it is recognized again. The practice of having concubines, additionally, is it's not even just not favorable; it's harmful for all people, for all people involved. It may be considered. It actually is, particularly in the methodology that I'm referencing, that I didn't describe, but that I'm referencing. It's increasingly favorable to the mainstream practices of dating, and playing the field and all the games that cats run on each other. I'm not lying. I'm doing it in the optimally righteous way that is almost imaginable. Um, but at the same time, there's an absence of full commitment necessarily to the women involved, and that's harmful. It's harmful for myself, wasting in spending seed my life energy, undermining the credibility of the things that I share, teach, practice, and additionally, um, un, not optimally caring for, intending for, to, and providing, supporting the interests of the women in terms of having husband and settling down and being supported, continuing life. I share everything I can, and am able to, so that continues. But a woman requires like not like a woman requires life devotion, and commitment, dutifully. It's not just a matter of nice intentions. It's actuality, and that's part of what dowry is. And additionally, so the things I share is a know-how, and that's actually extremely valuable for women today, because women in conventional society, in the secular methodology, the republic, science, and additionally, are increasingly situated to utilize knowledge in a way that is self-sustaining, even as a single woman in this society, in the postmodern and continuing society. So the knowledge that I share is actually very valuable, and does um, support, or does strengthen and increase a woman's ability to be self-sufficient in such a system. So that's actual, but at the same time, it's not preferable, because a woman needs further than just like materiality and status and security. She needs a man's attention and affection, touch, proximity, and further. So, and a man who uh, invests his attention and energies along a number of relationships with women is being derelict in each relationship that he has with a woman accordingly in that context. So again, it's not favorable, it's harmful. But again, given what the circumstances are at this moment, and the hostilities and restrictions, and additionally that are being manifested and threatened by the system, it's difficult to imagine, or to um, plan, prepare an alternative methodology, because as it is, the system has a history and a tendency of just imposing sterility on people directly and indirectly. And we can look at the things that are done to Native women through the generations of forcefully sterilizing women. Similarly, within kinfolk of Africa, and additionally, so that's like explicitly direct sterilization. But then there's political impotence, there's economic impotence, there's and strangleholds of just like slowly killing off an individual and slowly killing off a people, and providing rewards for non-procreating, and additionally abortion, and further. So this is just the methodology of the system, and meanwhile also promoting not just sanctioning and allowing, but promoting promiscuity and hypersexuality, and additionally, so it's extremely unhealthy circumstances in society in general. So when I talk about what I'm mentioning in terms of the virtual concubines, and additionally, it's actually favorable to what the current conditions are, and not just what the conditions are, but what the conditions that are being imposed upon are for years and years and years. But that's not an excuse, and it's not acceptable. Well, I have to watch that, because by different standards, it's not acceptable, particularly by those standards that expect people to be completely celibate. But for those who have the direction and the guidance and the inclination of procreation, this is what it is. So that being said, I've been at this for almost an hour at this point, and it's gonna wrap it up with this. And well, what I'll say as I wrap this up is that we're hitting the road, as I mentioned before, the Sukkah Hope Road Trip. Is the working title of what we're working with, sharing world liberty and roots. For those who still have the receptivity to such message after what I just communicate. We actually are receiving some responses and some support along these lines. I shared the shach that we receive, that we secure recently. I don't know how visible that is. I don't have it's a little bit. There it is. And then also we're working on getting the framework of the sukkah, and utilizing that sukkah as the epicenter of our road trip joint, and making appropriate adjustments that are halakhic accordingly. So we received some initial welcomes from host kinfolk, and so now we're working on logistics about schedule and material supplies, transportation, and programming, and connecting in the sequence of the tour at this point. So it's coming together. Alhamdulillah, Baruch Hashem, Hallelujah, Jai Om, Shishir Mado. And so that's where things are with that. And that's going to be a wrap for today, for the moment. Respect and honor to His Majesty Haile Selassie I. Respect and honor to Her Majesty Wazir Manan. All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim Jah Rastafari. Blessed love and peace.